In this tutorial, I'm going to show you the process of moving any of these panels around. Not necessarily to a new location within our user interface, although we will be doing that a little bit later on, but I also want to show you how we adapt these panels so that dependent on the point you have reached within your design, you can either hide these panels or collapse them so that they don't take up too much screen real estate. Just before I do any of that though, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping, in that you'll see this folder here called Test Site. For the moment I want to remove this. Therefore, all I need to do is right click on it, run down to Edit, and then fly out and choose the Delete option. Dreamweaver asks me if I'm sure about this. Well, I am, so I'll click on Yes. Okay, all done. That folder has now been removed. Now do be certain that you are sure you want to remove it, because removing it like this within Dreamweaver also removes it from your hard drive. Anyway, I'm happy with that, so we'll progress, and I'll progress by explaining panel groups. As you can see here within this panel group, at present we have 4 tabs: Files, Assets, and then 2 link tabs, CSS Designer and CSS Transitions. Okay, I've set these tabs up to be located here within this panel group. Incidentally, if you think this panel group is taking up too much space on your screen, then simply roll your cursor over this vertical division line, left click, and then drag to the right, and as you can see, this panel group's footprint becomes that much smaller. Now if you want to take this a stage further so that it takes up even less space, well, can you see this button here? I know it's quite small at this screen resolution, but it's there. Well, if I click on it, as you can see, my tabbed panels, which a moment ago revealed their content within them, well, now we just see these buttons instead. We get a small button icon with its related name next to it, i.e. Files, Assets, CSS Designer, and CSS Transitions. Now if you feel you don't really need the textual indicator, then left click once more and then drag to the right, and there you'll see what we are now left with are just these 4 button icons. Of course, if I want to open any of these, then rolling over the particular icon, you'll also see a tooltip popping up just to remind you what it is. Our top one here, for example, is our Files panel. Well, by clicking on it, this now expands our panel group, but with the selected button that we clicked on being the exposed revealed panel. And if I click on the button once more, well, as you can see, our panel group now collapses out of sight. And just to prove what I've said, if I come down to our second button, Assets, if I click on here, of course our panel group opens up, but this time the Assets panel is the panel that is revealed. I'll click it once more to collapse it, and then if I want to return back to where I was, clicking on this button once more, well, as you can see, opens up our panel group as it was previously. And the particular panel that we had open last, the Assets panel, is the one that's open. If you don't see the Assets panel, you can go up to Window and click on it there to open it. Keep in mind, the assets I'll be showing you are on my computer, so you won't see most of these. Now, seeing as we're looking at the Assets panel, let me just go off on a slight tangent. You might be forgiven for thinking, what's the point of this Assets panel? There doesn't appear to be anything here. However, running vertically to the left down here, you'll see all these sub-buttons. And therefore, if I click on the top one, the Images sub-button, well now you'll see all the image assets that are contained within this particular website at the moment. Well, as you can see, they're now all revealed to me. This doesn't mean they're all being used at the moment. This simply means that all these photographs here are within the Images subfolder for my site. And like me, I expect you'll find this Assets panel to be very useful, certainly when you've got lots of photographs, but the actual name of the photograph, the file name, isn't particularly indicative of what the actual photograph is. All these beginning with IMG followed by a number doesn't actually tell me what that photograph is. So therefore, by working my way down and just randomly clicking on any of these photographs, well, as you can see, I see a preview just above, allowing me to decide whether I want to use that particular photograph. Now don't forget, if you do roll over any of these sub-buttons, you'll see a little pop-up indicating what that particular button refers to. For example, this 5th one down, if I select it, well, any movies that I've got included within my folder, well, of course it will show up here. We don't see a preview above, however we do see more textual information down here, i.e. we can see that this is a flash video by the extension .flv, and we can also see the file size at just over 9 megabytes. Now I'll just come back over to my Files panel by clicking on the Files tab. What I want to show you now is how we can have some panels floating around our screen. Maybe these will be panels that we don't use all that often, but when we do use them, we want to be able to call them up, access whatever it has to offer us, and then close it down. For example, if I want to call open a Behaviors panel, well, I can do this by coming up to Windows first of all, and then running down to the option Behaviors. As soon as I select it, then this Behaviors panel opens up for me. Now for the moment, don't concern yourself with what this particular panel does, only that it is a floating panel. And if I left click on it here, I can drag and move it somewhere else. Therefore, at a particular moment, if it's obscuring something on my screen that I need to see, then as we've just seen, I can move it out of the way. Now, if at some subsequent point I decide, well, I actually do like this Behaviors panel, and I don't want it to be just a simply floating panel, well, I could dock it within an existing panel group. And I can do this by, well, first of all, left clicking on it once more, and I'll move it over here to our existing panel group. Once I move it over the existing panels, then you'll see that blue outline, which means if I deselect now, our Behaviors panel now becomes part of this group. And of course it works in exactly the same way. If I click the Files tab, our Files panel opens up as expected, and then moving back to Behaviors, selecting that, of course, opens this. Now if I want to disconnect it from our panel group, well, left click on it once more and drag it away from the panel group. Consequently, it now reverts back to being a floating panel. And of course I can move it around wherever I like. Now in actual fact I don't want it at the moment, so I'm going to click on its cross here to close it from sight. And I'll open up my Files panel once more. And in fact I think I'm going to reduce the footprint here just slightly, so I'll left click once more and drag to the right. Okay, that should do me. Now I do want to show you something else, but I need to open up a document. So I'll double click on our index page here to open it up. And I've done this so all these tabs running across here horizontally now become available for use. And if I want to select any of these, remember this one I downloaded from the Adobe Exchange earlier on. This Menus extension. If I select the company name tab, then underneath over at the far left, you'll see the relevant button that would allow me to open this up and use it. Something else you might like to do, so that you can adapt what all these panels look like, is you might not want to see all these as icons. Well, by right-clicking anywhere here, you'll see this option, Show as Menu. I'll select it. Consequently now, all those button icons that horizontally spread across our page at the top here have now been removed, and instead they've been replaced over here at the left-hand side with this menu option. And as you can see, if I click on this drop reveal arrow, all the options that we saw a few moments ago running horizontally, well, they're still available, but now as this vertical menu. Which means if I want to open up all the common functions, selecting common at the top here, of course now reveals these options to us. Perhaps I want to choose structure, so by clicking on here once more, I'll run down to my third option, structure. Therefore, only the available options within structure are now in view. Or perhaps if I click on here once more, I only want to see my Project 7 extensions. Now don't panic if you don't see these. These are extra extensions that I've purchased. They don't come as part of Dreamweaver. Now, once you get to this stage and you decide, well, I don't really know where I've got up to. I've changed things around, I've moved things, I've got floating panels, I docked these floating panels. It's at this point you might be thinking, surely there's got to be an easy way that I can revert back to the Dreamweaver default. Well, of course there is. Come up to Window once more on your menu, and then roll down here, nearly towards the bottom, to where it says Workspace Layout. And you'll notice with the resulting flyout that I've got a check mark, and it's next to the Compact option. You'll also notice up here, to verify that we are looking at the compact view, well, we see the name here. I'll come back down to Workspace Layout, and therefore if I want to reset my compact view to the default compact view, well, of course all I need to do is come down here and click on Reset Compact. I'm not going to, because I want to show you how we can also do this from up here. Notice where I pointed out Compact a moment ago. Just to the right is this drop down arrow. Click on it, and of course you're going to see the same options. Well, I'm going to click on Reset Compact. Okay, and now we go back to the default settings. And because we were last looking at the Project 7 extensions, well, that's what's revealed here. That's no problem though. I can click here and change it back to common. And working like this in the default view, well, I think it's a 50-50 split really. Sometimes I like working like this, and sometimes I like working as we were at the beginning of this tutorial. It can be useful to work like this. For example, if I'm looking at my Files panel, and I've got an empty document open, our index page for example, then by coming back over to my Insert tab, and looking at all my common functions, if I want to start off and include a div tag, well, I would select my top option, div. Now if you are brand new to Dreamweaver, don't worry about this for the moment. I'll get back to you on how all this works later. But because I've selected this, I now see this Insert Div dialog. I want it to be placed at my insertion point, so I'll leave that as it is for the top field, and I'm going to give this an ID of main. And then simply click on OK. And there you go. Of course, we've now included our div tag up here, ready for us to add in any further content. For example, if I come back over to my Insert tab and then click on our option Drop Reveal here, I'll change it from Common down to my second option, Web Assist. Once more, you won't see this if you are brand new to Dreamweaver. This is another extension company that you can buy ready-made extensions from. I'm just doing this as an example. Now this is one way of working, and like I say, 50% of the time I do work like this. But also, for the other 50%, maybe because I've been using Dreamweaver for quite a long time, well, I quite like my insert panel to be placed horizontally above my document window. So to revert back to the position it was at when this tutorial started, I'll left click on the Insert tab again and then drag and drop moving across here, and you'll now notice this blue horizontal line again to indicate that we are now about to dock this panel over here. And once I deselect, well, as you can see, we now revert back to how we started. Okay, so that's a run through then. We've now seen how we can adapt our panels, in that we can move them around, we can open up floating panels, we can dock those floating panels, we can reset a workspace. So for the moment, we'll finish up here, and in fact in the next tutorial, I'll talk a little bit further about workspaces.